Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network. Today, I'm joined by the fabulous Deidra Towns, and we are here to make shifts happen. So, I think today we're talking about how that actually works structurally, right? How it is that we do this work. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay. Where do we start?
With how for me starts with desire. You have to want to. I cannot make myself do anything I don't want to do, if that makes any sense. Because I've tried to force myself to do things because I think I should or I'm supposed to. It does not end well. It never ends well. And so, how becomes clear when you get connected to your desire. Now,
Okay.
desire resides in the body, right? And a
Okay.
lot of people, including me, I used to live kind of from the neck up. And so if you kind of live in your head and you're sort of disconnected from your body and what's going on, and by that I mean your body's sending you messages all the time, but you're either dismissing them or you're not experiencing them at all. A lot of trauma also lives in the body. And so a lot of people find it easier to just live up here, then they don't have to deal with all that messy stuff down there. So if that's the case, you might not be connected to your desire. It might be hard to connect to your desire. And if that's hard for you, the next thing is to follow your curiosity. What are you
Mm.
curious about? What are you interested in? What do you want to learn more about? Um, where do you want to grow? Like even something like I just downloaded an app recently because I'm a nerd and will I want to know what the plants are that I see. Like if I see a flower, if I see a plant, and this app will let me take a picture of the thing and it'll tell me what it is.
Okay, I like that. I like that a lot.
Right. So
That's
that's
like
following my curiosity. But that leads you down a
I
road.
I re- I did recently download one, and I'll have to send it to you because I imagine you'll like it, where you can record bird song and it'll tell you what kind of birds you're listening
This
to.
is what I'm saying. Right. So I was just in Mexico and the place was so integrated with nature. There were so many animals. I saw things I had never seen before. And birds would come. We had a little balcony, and birds would come and chill on the balcony. And I was taking pictures of all the birds and using Google Images to tell me what bird is this. I saw an actual woodpecker. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Woody. I know I'm dating myself. But I was like, I'd never seen an actual woodpecker. So it was kind of cool. But that is
Mhm.
following your curiosity. And then I might take it a step further and look up what's the metaphysical meaning of this bird. So if I'm seeing this bird, what does this bird represent in the realm of spirit or in the realm of metaphysics? And what is that telling me? So that will also inform my experience and what's going on. And it might make something click, or it might connect some dots of some things that I've been puzzling with, or something like that. And thus we go down the road.
Yeah, I think especially making connections is a really important part of this process, right?
Absolutely.
So, how do we do that?
How? You have a lot of how questions.
Yes, how?
How do we make connections? Making connections is a function of seeing, right? Either you see it or you don't. And as far as I've can discern, our ability to see is very much a function of how well we know ourselves, how much self-awareness we have of our own selves. It's almost like if you're hiding something about yourself or some things about yourself, it absolutely impairs your ability to see the things outside of you. And if you put that in practical terms, if you're playing hide and seek and you're in the closet and you're looking out of a slat in the closet, you can't really see all the things that's happening out there. So, to the extent that you are hiding within yourself, the fragmented parts of yourself, the parts you don't like, the parts you're ashamed of, the parts somebody told you were wrong or bad, to the extent that you're hiding that stuff is going to impact your ability to see and make connections.
And what makes people hide?
Oh, what makes people hide? Shame will make people hide. Um, Experiences of, you raised your hand in class and when you gave your answer, everybody laughed. That'll it's almost imperceptible, and you make a decision. Oh, that wasn't good, or that was wrong, or I don't like the way this feels. So you have an experience and you don't like the way it feels, and so you start shrinking yourself so you don't have to feel that way anymore. I don't want to feel that. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to extend myself. I'm not going to raise my hand. Or that's, for me at least, how hiding can begin. And go ahead. You have a question?
When we're hiding, we're not receptive to the messages that we are given. So, how do
Right.
we fix that?
Self awareness. How do you become aware? So one of the things that I think is very interesting, my father says this thing like, if you're not meeting any resistance, you're probably not moving, right? Because a body in motion, the laws of physics, the body in motion will experience resistance, right? Even if the resistance is air. So as you are moving towards something, you will be getting information from this resistance, will be giving you information, right? The resistance can tell you, oh, you need to adjust to the left, or you need to adjust to the right, or things like that. That's how you become aware of your body in space, right? So if there's more wind on the right, then maybe you need to make an adjustment to the left, or some such thing like that. So having a thing that you're moving toward, that you're working toward, that you're looking forward to will cause you to be in motion. And in that motion, you are going to discover some things about yourself in the process of moving toward that thing. Mm-hmm.
But it's got to be one thing, right? Not 12 things. Like, I- define for me what that looks like when our priorities are spread too thin, right?
Mm.
This is a problem my people have a lot, right? We we have a we have a lot of loves. We do a lot of things. We spread ourselves so thin that there's no, maybe it doesn't feel like there's momentum, or
Mm-hmm.
just that there's no external appearance, maybe. But either way, how do we decide what it looks like, what the priority is, what the priorities are, what to say no to, what to say yes to?
Okay. So there's two things that I have for this question. And the first thing is sometimes the many things are one thing, right? So you have to look at what you're doing and really discern for yourself, are all these things I'm working toward really a function of one thing? And then you can focus on the one thing even though you're doing a lot of different things, right? Because sometimes it takes a lot of different things to make dinner, right? You can't just focus on the meat or the protein. If you do protein, you can't just focus on the protein. You have to do the protein and the sides and the sauce or and the dessert, but it's all dinner. So if you're all doing all dinner, then that's one thing. But if you're doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the same time, maybe that's spreading your resources too thin, because time is sometimes a factor in choosing how to prioritize. Breakfast needs to be ready first. So maybe focus on breakfast. That doesn't mean you can't, if you're doing bread, if you're breaking bread for dinner, maybe you start the dough and then put it to rise and then make the breakfast. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a timing thing, but focus is one of the ways we amplify power.
Say more.
And so, well, it's like a light. A focused light is a laser and it can burn a hole in something. But an incandescent bulb is very diffuse and it will light the whole room. So sometimes you need the power of a laser, and sometimes you need to be diffuse and spread it around so that there's light all around. So as you're prioritizing and you're looking at your list or what you need to do, there's a few things. There's what can be delegated. And for those of us who have control issues, that can be difficult. Those of us with perfection issues, I don't want to let anybody else do it because they won't do it the way I would do it, right? That can be an issue. But you can't live a big life if you're doing everything yourself. Nobody does anything big by themselves. You can't run for dog catcher by yourself. You need a team.
True. So old though. That makes us look so old. Can't run for dog
You can't
catcher.
run for dog catcher by yourself. You cannot. And so there's something to be said for the power of having an enrollment conversation, right? Because enrolling people, leading, it's so funny. I feel like I'm going way off topic, but we're going to come back around. But leading people used to bother me because I have issues with authority, right? Because I'm a rebel and a nerd. And I didn't want to be in the authority position. And so I have often eschewed leadership positions, although I have leadership qualities. And what I found was that I like the kind of leadership that is collaborative. I like to collaborate with other leaders. I don't want to be responsible for a whole bunch of people. I want to work with people who are all standing in their own power and their own sovereignty and their own agency. And we're working together to build something or to grow something. That's collaborative leadership. That looks very attractive to me. And so when you are working with people, in order to get people on your team, in order to have people engaged in this vision that you have and create whatever it is. I was doing a repast for somebody, and I was lucky enough and very grateful for the people that came, and because I can't do it all by myself. And so people came and they helped. They were enrolled in the vision. They were asked, do you know how to ask? Do you know how to make an invitation? To invite
I have
people
a whole show about that, y'all.
in. Right. So that's a thing. That's part of this prioritizing and how to focus your energy and how to focus your attention. Sometimes it means delegating or inviting someone to participate, to join you in the journey or in the creation, in the collaboration of whatever it is that you're trying to build. But that takes something, that takes some skills. You have to know how to talk to people. You have to share your story with them in a way that it resonates and they see what's in it for them. That's an enrollment conversation. So you're enrolling them in the vision. So people helped me because my friend who passed away, he was so generous, had such a big heart. I didn't have to say anything. I was like, I'm doing this thing. Can you do this? But they loved him like I loved him. And so it was a no-brainer. And even once we were there, people were in the space saying, can I help with anything? Everybody wanted to be in contribution. So it doesn't work so well for selfish people. It doesn't work so well. This collaborative leadership doesn't work so well for people who are invested in transactional relationships where they're not willing to do anything unless they're getting something out of it. That's transactional, which is very rooted in capitalist colonial stuff, which we're not going to go down that road, but you get what I'm pointing to. And there's an opportunity to really lead and live another way. And that's part of what I find fascinating or very attractive about the kind of leadership, collaborative leadership that I'm interested in, and that allows you to have more and to do more and to do big things in the world.
Hmm. And to do big things in the world, you have to let go of
Mm-hmm.
many smaller things.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's talk about that process a little bit.
Well, how do you define what's small?
Good question.
And so it's interesting. What's coming up for me is as we're talking about this is in my model of leadership, there's no job that's too small to do for me to do. It's not like, oh, I'm the leader, so you know, I'm not I'm not doing that. It's not it's never that, right? But there is an efficiency, a working toward efficiencies. I am not necessarily the best person to have um what am I not good at? I don't know. Something. I'll say math, although that's not really true, but I used to be able to do it in my head and then I had children and they took all my math. And now I have to do it on a piece of paper with a pen, but still. So I might not be the person to crunch the numbers, but I might be the person in the front talking to people. Everybody's not good at the front talking to people, and so it's recognizing what your gifts, where your strengths are, and maybe not characterizing it as a small thing, but the things that aren't your best thing, the things that you're not best suited to do, to allow someone who that's their jam, that's their genius, and they love to do that, and to invite them in to participate in that way.
Hmm. Truly, I think that the more that we all lean into our zones of genius, right,
Mhm.
the more we actually get done.
Facts.
How do we tell the difference between what's genius and what's just excellence? This is
Mm.
part of that focus thing. How
Mhm.
do we laser in into what our gifts actually are?
So a lot of people have a lot of gifts, right? Most people. You're not just
Mhm.
gifted in one thing. You might be gifted in many things, but everything doesn't light you up on the inside. For me, coaching is in my zone of genius because it's what I would do for free. I'm good at it. It's I'm always wanting to learn and grow this thing in myself. So that's even back to curiosity. That's back to desire. I lead with this. What do you lead with? Just because I'm good at something doesn't mean that that's what I need to be doing. So, um, that's one of the ways for me to tell where your excellence is because you could be good. I'm good at this, but it doesn't light me up, right? I used to think I wanted to be a doctor. When I went to college, I started in majoring in biology because I like to know how things work. I'm fascinated by systems and processes. And then I realized I didn't want to work in a hospital. So that's not the job for me. That's not the job for me. I could be an excellent doctor. No, not for me. So,
And that's where we get back to the hiding thing because you have to be really honest all the time about what your desires are and are not.
mhm, absolutely. Oh my gosh. My mother used to say, "To thine own self be true." I don't know if I said this on the last call. To thine own self be true. And when I was little, I didn't know what she was like. How could you not be true to you? Like, you are yourself all the time. How can you not be? Because I think very literally. And as I got older, I came to understand what that means. It means really be honest with yourself about what you want. And sometimes that's really hard because people who love you and people who you admire and people who are supporting you want something else for you than what you want for yourself. And to stand in that can be really hard,
Really hard.
really hard.
Mhm.
And so that requires a level of honesty because it's easy. It's easier to just acquiesce. It's easier to not make any waves because you don't want to upset them, because you love them and they love you and you don't want them to be disappointed in you. But sometimes those people don't really understand, and that friction that's there, that tension between they want something different than you want for yourself, can also be the grain of sand that becomes a pearl if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to withstand the tension of that.
As a practice, what does doing the work look like?
It looks like rigorous honesty with yourself, right? Really being honest about who you are and what you want. And that process in itself can take years of unpacking the layers of shoulds that get layered on you by culture and society and family and church. If you have church in your background, there's a lot of shoulds. And some of those shoulds will work for you and you'll keep them, and some of them won't. But there's a process of unpacking that stuff, of pulling back the layers and saying, this worked for me when I was 6, but it doesn't really work for me at 26. And to have the courage to discard it and to at least start looking for it. This doesn't work. What does work?
And in addition to radical honesty,
Mhm.
what are some habits and practices that can help us get there?
So for me, it's the practices of self awareness. So it starts with being honest with yourself, moving toward a goal, working towards something, whatever that is, deciding I want to climb Mount Everest. I have a on my bucket list is to go to Havapusai Falls, which is in the Grand Canyon. There's a waterfall in the Grand Canyon. You have to hike there. And I don't hike. I,
I
so
hear you.
that's a process for me, right? It's starting hiking first of all and working building up my stamina and working my way up to being able to do something like that and to camp out there and hike back the next day. And so there's a whole process involved, but in that process I'm going to learn some things about myself, right? So it's having the goal, and it's really looking. Are you looking? Are Do you have an awareness, a habit, a tendency to look for what's underneath the surface? So there's what's happening on the surface that you see, and then there's the energetics of what's going on underneath the surface. And are you seeing the reflections of yourself in everything that's happening around you? What if everything that's happening that comes into your conscious awareness is coming for you? What if it's for you, not happening to you? And if it's for you, are you willing to look and see how? Well, how does this fit? What is this for? What am I to learn? Is this trying to grow me? Is this telling me I need to let something go? Is it telling me I need to add something in? It's a whole way of being in the world, having that level of awareness, of self-awareness, and then a willingness to be reflective. and to recognize yourself when you see it in the world, when you see yourself in the world. Because people and things and places are always reflecting back to us, right? If I lose my phone, that's telling me you're not paying attention. Why you don't know where you put your phone down? I'm not paying attention. I'm not being mindful, right? So that's it's a tap on the shoulder. You better pay attention, right? Because you might lose more than your phone. You might lose something more significant than a phone.
How do we cultivate? Here's another how. How do we cultivate awareness in this here world we got, baby? Like, this is a hard thing.
How do we cultivate awareness?
How do I even listen to my inner soul whisperings when there's TikTok videos to watch and like 5 new Netflix series I gotta catch up on and like,
So, but it's everywhere though.
right.
It's everywhere. So, are you mindfully watching the TikTok videos? Are you mindfully watching the series? Are you looking for the thread that's connecting the things that are happening on this series to the things that are happening in your life? It's less about what you're doing and more about the way you're doing it. So it's cultivating a habit of the way you do the thing. Who are you being in the doing of the thing?
What does that look like structurally?
What does it look like structurally to look for who you're being in the doing of the
Hmm.
thing?
I know, but like, this is hard for folks.
Yeah. Well, nobody teaches it. Well, they don't teach it in
No.
school. They don't teach you this in school. You can hire a coach who can help you learn this. But in general, in our society, they don't, first of all, the powers that be, the government, the whoever they are, they don't really want you to be self-aware because they don't want you to be aware of what they're doing. So if they can keep you in the dark, they can keep doing the nonsense they're doing.
I tend to agree with that assessment. Yes.
Right. So it's something you have to seek for yourself. It's got to be important enough to you. And it's there's a little bit of if when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, but it might not look like what you think it's going to look like. Like Mr. Miyagi might not show up. It might be somebody else, right? It could be the homeless guy who's asking you for change. It could be any there's an opportunity in every interaction if you're looking, if you're paying attention. And that looking and that paying attention happens when you're centered in yourself, centered in yourself, who you are, when you're honest with yourself. All the things that we've been talking about, they all feed on one another to expand your capacity to do this.
Hmm. So, what does synchronicity look like when it's
Oh,
all working? What does it look like? What does it feel like when we've actually done this?
it feels like riding a wave, and I don't surf. So I am imagining that this is what riding a wave feels like. If you are standing on one foot on the floor, you're not standing still because your foot that you're standing on is doing this to keep you upright. There are all these minor adjustments that are happening all the time. That is what I imagine riding a surfboard is like. You have to make all these minor adjustments to keep
Hmm.
yourself on top of the surfboard riding the wave. That is what it feels like.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that assessment. And how do we get more of that?
More, more, more. How do we get more of that? More is about expanding capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Expanding capacity comes with growing yourself. And I want to say the last time I was on, we talked about comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And just today, I was thinking about, are you willing to give up what you love? Because sometimes expanding out of your comfort zone is about giving up. It's going to call you to give up something you love. Like, I really, really, really love words. Finding just the right word with just the right meaning to express what it is I'm trying to say. I told you I was a nerd. Okay. So I really love words, but I also recognize that there are things that exist beyond the expression of words. And so
Mm-hmm.
if I only focus on words, then I'm limiting myself from the experience of those other things because they exist outside of the realm of language. So sometimes you have to be willing to give up what you love and what you're familiar with so you can get a bigger piece, so you can have a bigger experience, so you can expand your capacity.
Hmm. I really like that a lot. And I think that the more we lean into expansion, the more comes. It's very cyclical flywheel effect type thing, right?
Yes,
Once
absolutely.
you find the first threads of it, it becomes much easier to wind that up into a ball.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And you build your muscle around it. You build your muscle around the process because in the giving up something, and it doesn't mean you give it up forever like, oh, I'm just never using words again. That's not what I'm talking about at all, right? But there's a grief with that involved. I thought this was the pinnacle of the thing. And then you realize, oh, this is not the pinnacle. It's kind of like the children's song, The Bear Went Over the Mountain. The bear went over the mountain to see what he could see, and he saw another mountain.
Oh,
Yeah. And then it just goes
well,
on.
how about that then?
Yeah, that's just continuation. And
Mhm.
so you get this capacity to do it, but you understand that it's a cycle and it's a process. And so you're in the grief and you can hold the grief of this thing of the losing the idea that this is the pinnacle of a thing. And you also are holding space in anticipation for the experience of the next thing or the new thing to open up. That doesn't happen if the grief shuts you down. That doesn't happen if the grief makes you close up and go, retreat. So, can you hold the grief and not deny it and not make it wrong and bad, and also hold your hand open to receive the next thing that's unfolding? And
Right.
the more you do it, the more you build your capacity to do that, to hold polarity.
Both and it's a big deal, right? It's a really big deal. And I think the more we lean into it, the more we find that capacity. But I think there's a gap here, right? Between having enough yarn to ball it up, right?
Mhm.
And finding that thread. How do we help folks make that transition?
Help folks make the transition between
Not
finding the thread.
right, finding their own threads, right? What are beyond listening, where am I structurally starting? Physically,
Right.
Can
So,
I can I
mhm.
read a book? Can I
Oh my gosh,
right?
there's a million books.
Right.
There's a million books. Uh, I really like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle
Okay.
because that's about being present. It's about how do you keep your attention and your focus on the present moment. And that's one of the ways. So we're talking about looking and seeing and being open. That doesn't happen if you're not present. That awareness, that self-awareness, that awareness of what's happening, that making the connections and seeing the connections and connecting the dots, that doesn't happen if you're not present. If you're wrapped up in your anxiety about the future or grieving something from the past, excuse me, you're not present. And
Mhm.
so it's like there's always, if you find yourself being one sided, right? Because in this world on the material plane is a world of duality. And very often we want to focus on one side of a thing and we ignore the other side. And that stuff falls into the subconscious and then behaves badly and comes to bite us on the butt. That's why building the capacity to hold polarity is so crucial to this way of being in the world that we're discussing today. Um, like I was saying about words, thinking words are the greatest thing, words are the pinnacle, or logic, right? There's
Mhm.
a lot of people, especially in our society in the West, logic is highly valued commodity, the ability to think logically. But logic will only take you so far because logic doesn't always lead you to the correct answer. There are things that exist outside of logic, but you don't get there. You don't get to see them or experience them if you won't let that go. And then we're back to both and. We're back to
Right.
can you hold both things? So it's even recognizing, oh, I'm only seeing one side of this to get you to say, oh, there's another side. What is it? You don't have to like it. You don't have to dislike it, but you need to be aware that it's there. And when you're aware of it and when you can own it, then it's neutralized.
Mhm. And I do think we talked in the first episode about sitting in the discomfort of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of building this skill is recognizing that it's hard.
Yes. It's hard. It is easier if you can do it in community. It's
Mhm.
harder if you try to do it by yourself. Even having a partner, right? Because everybody's not going to understand. Everybody's not going to get what you're trying to do. Everybody isn't even thinking about these things. Everybody isn't trying to have this conversation that we're having today, right?
No.
Right? And so those are not the people that you need to be in community with. But there are people, there is a contingent of people who recognize that there's something more. And sometimes this more exists in the space of intangibles. So if you can orient yourself to perceive intangibles, you open yourself to explore this space. And it's very helpful to have companionship on the journey.
Define for me intangible.
Intangibles, reputation is intangible, but it's a real thing, right? Something you build, it's something you work on. You can't see it, but you know that it's there. That's an intangible. People who are tend to be logical also or tend to live only in logic. They tend to diminish or dismiss the intangibles because you can't see them, feel them, hear them, touch them. But they're actual real things. Intuition is intangible, and it's a real thing. Now, you can dismiss your intuition, you can not listen to your intuition, for better or for worse, and that doesn't mean that make it any less real.
And at the same time, it is a skill that you can practice at and develop. And I
Absolutely.
think that's kind of a lot of this, I've always heard and said, magic is just science that we haven't figured out yet,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm,
that's so much of what these things are. They're very practical things that we just don't have the words for.
mhm. Right. So, Mary Marcy tells the story of how electricity existed before Edison discovered it. Like, electricity wasn't new. We just didn't have language for it. We didn't have the distinction of electricity,
Mm.
right? There was lightning. There's been lightning all along. That's electricity. Electricity has is. It just is. We didn't know how to harness it. We didn't know it was an actual thing until I don't know who was it, Benjamin Frank, one of them, one of those guys, Franklin, Edison, somebody. They did the work.
Somebody did the work.
Somebody did the
Somebody
work.
did the science.
Somebody did the
Now,
science.
now I have lights and internet. It's
Yes,
great. Thanks.
yes. For these things, we are grateful.
Exactly. And this is true for our personal development.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've talked about how to develop it. We've talked about what it looks like. We've talked about how to tell that we're on the right track. What if we're not on the right track? And I know intuition plays a part here, but how do we tell when we're not quite hitting the things that we need to be hitting?
So that's interesting because there are a lot of people who think, oh, this makes me uncomfortable, so this has to be wrong. And we've already talked about being able to sit in the discomfort. Discomfort in and of itself isn't wrong. I think there's a way of feeling in your body that gets activated. There's sometimes somebody will say something and it's just a no, right? It's just, oh no, not that. Like, I knew I couldn't work in a hospital. That was not the life for me. And so discomfort is not the cue. It's sometimes there's a straight no, and you need to listen to that. And sometimes there's resistance, but resistance is not no. Resistance is an invitation to look at this. What is underneath this? Is this resistance there because there's trauma on top of it and you're not going to be able to pass this until you heal this trauma? So that doesn't make it wrong, the wrong track. I'm trying to think of what would make it the wrong track. I almost feel like all roads lead to Rome. It's like
Mm.
it's like all roads lead to Rome. You just have to choose a road. Um, One of the influencers I follow, her name is Shanae Howard, who I really like. She wrote a really good post yesterday about what am I willing to struggle for? What am I willing to struggle for? I think like there's nothing wrong with struggling, but you want to choose your battles, right? Um, my son, the middle child, just recently went to the Navy. And for a long time, I had been telling him, I just need you to pick something. You need to find the thing that you're willing to work hard for, even when you don't like it, right? Even when it's hard, you still want to do it, even though it's hard. So that's not it. But there is you could say, I don't want to do it this way, right? I don't want to take this road. You can choose to take another road. Um, I think you can, I think your awareness tells you when to pivot.
And I do think some of this is just about making the choice, right? I think so many people get stuck in the what if this or
Mm.
what if that, when truly, if all roads lead to Rome,
Hmm.
it's just about picking a road and going down it.
Right.
Why is that so scary?
Uh, I think because there is a bit of adventure. Yes, you have to have a sense of adventure in order to do that. You have to be willing to be with the unknown. You have to be willing to step into the unknown, which is very similar to stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Yep, more discomfort.
More discomfort,
Dang it. Okay.
more discomfort, but it's so worth it in the end. It's so worth it. Um, yeah, I think it's just the knowing. You know, this is for me, this is not for me. I can't be prescriptive about it. And sometimes you think this is for you. Oh, I think this is for me. This is what I want to do. And then you start down that road and you realize, oh no, no, no. No, no, no. I need a different road.
Mhm.
I'm not doing that.
And so many people will ignore that intuition and lead with the sunk cost of, well, I've already started down this road.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's okay to have to, take a side trail
Mm-hmm.
or go
Or
back
cut your losses.
or cut your losses and
Cut
go
your
back
losses
and find a different fucking road.
and start over.
Mhm.
That's hard, right? It's to me, I liken it to being in a bad marriage, honestly. It's like, oh, I've been married for 10 years. I've already put in all this, da 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 da. And then it's like, well, you could have 10 more years or 20 more years of that, or you could start over again. But I don't think either one is necessarily wrong in and of itself on its face. It's just a choice.
Mhm.
Which work are you willing to do? Like, there will be work.
Mhm.
Just choose your work.
Well, that's very exciting. Would you care to leave us with some words of encouragement?
Words of encouragement. Um, you are already whole, perfect, and complete, lacking nothing. And if you can hold that as a belief, and when you find yourself confronted by things that are telling you something different, to remember that, like, if I'm whole, perfect, and complete, then I already have the solution to this, right? If you, as we discussed before, if you understand that time is not linear, you've already solved this in the future. So you already know the solution. That often for me will take the tension away of the situation, right? If I'm stuck or I'm frustrated or whatever, if I can stop and drop into, okay, I've already done this. in the relaxed state is how you get to the solution. Like Einstein said, a problem can't be solved at the level of consciousness where it was created. You have to elevate your consciousness. That doesn't happen when you're holding tension. That doesn't happen when you're frustrated. That doesn't happen when you're nervous. And getting yourself to relax, activating your relaxation response in the face of whatever has triggered you is a real skill that can be learned and can be developed over time. But that's what's necessary to drop in so that you can see what's necessary. What's necessary right now? What do I need right now to do right now?
I think truly learning to regulate my nervous system will be the hardest skill I ever continue to develop in my lifetime,
Yeah.
and the most worthwhile.
And the most worthwhile. As they say in there's a hip hop song, it's levels to this. And there's
Hmm.
always another level.
Hmm.
Just keep living.
And the cool thing is, if you start this journey and you do this work at the beginning, it becomes easier to do that as
Yes,
we go along.
absolutely. Absolutely. You find your peers along the road so you get community for yourself around this stuff.
Hmm.
People you can talk to, people you can process with, people you can share with. This is what happened to me. I was just sharing with somebody today, and whatever I shared, whatever story I told her, she was like, "Oh, I really get this other thing that I've been noodling on for myself." And so in this sharing, you spoke about magic. There's something magical that happens there. You don't even know how you're going to impact someone else by your sharing. And so that's what becomes available, I think.
And I think that's where we leave it, because the next time we're looking at minimizing emotional triggers. And then the time after that, we will be talking about nervous system regulation.
Yes.
So, stick with us, y'all. We are going to dive into how to actually do this work, more hows, but truly, those are how questions that are easier to answer.
Well, they're less conceptual.
That's definitely true.
Yes.
But I'm looking forward to it. And I think that we got a lot of ground to cover.
We do.
So stick with us, y'all. Come back, or you can find us at the neurodiversitymedianetwork.com, where you can subscribe. At some point in time, this will all be a masterclass series of joy, where you'll be able to dive into all of these pieces. Paid subscribers get access to that. And right now, we've got a masterclass series going. Next Friday, we're talking about sleep. I'm telling you, it's amazing. Feel free to come on over and join us there. That is neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. Deidra, thank you. All right. I'm gutting up because truly triggers are going to be, that one's going to be a fun conversation,
Yes.
y'all. So excited. It'll be amazing. And I hope y'all join us for it. We'll see you next time. Bye.